And welcome to the Lyons Share podcast, where we talk family, faith, football, finance, and fun. I'm your host, Mitch Lyons. This episode, as always, brought to you by MitchLyonsWealth.com. Check us out. Lots of great free resources there. You can also check out our YouTube channel, Mitch Lyons Wealth and the Lyons Share. So today, we're excited to have a guest who is well known in NFL circles, and I think we shared a few different times. Fortunately, I don't remember getting hit directly by him, but he played on some great teams and was a great player. Bryce Paup. Bryce, welcome to the Lyons Share.
Thanks for having me. It's good to get together in not hostile environments.
Exactly. Yeah. So, well, I certainly was aware of you, and as a backup tight end, you probably weren't aware of me, but I mean, you were a pretty high profile player. But I think your story is unique from the standpoint you weren't necessarily high profile as you came into the league, right? And even going into college. So, I'd love to just kind of talk, have you share your background, some of the things you dealt with as a kid, and maybe overlooked, like a lot of guys, frankly, that have gone on to NFL success, maybe overlooked. And I think it's a great story to share because I think there's so much in it that can be applied to everyone's lives, right? The old David versus Goliath kind of thing, and overcoming adversity. So yeah, so welcome, and yeah, tell us a little bit about your upbringing and just kind of where Bryce Paup got to start.
Well, I grew up out in the country, and I was the youngest of four. Had two older brothers and an older sister, and I don't know, just non-assuming, hardworking parents. My dad did custom farm work, and so in his busy seasons, I might not really see him much until Sunday. When we'd go to church, and
Yeah.
he would get me up, and my brother's up like at 5 to 5:30, somewhere in that ballpark, sit outside in the hallway and read the Bible to us, and gave us that good foundation. But as we grew older, we learned to appreciate that. At the time, not so much, because we went to sleep. But in the busy season, he had to work, and he was gone, and we wouldn't see him at night. I mean, he would work over 100 hours a week in the busy season, and it was just go, 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 and that's all I knew. And so when that's what you see in the busy season, even when we weren't out working, there were certain things we had to do, often to get him prepared for his next day. And so we would have to do that. And, as young kids, sometimes you wouldn't get it done. And, there was consequences. And, that's all part of it. As I was growing up, I learned to love sports. My oldest brother was 6 years older, and he played football and was pretty good at it. And we always watched the Dallas Cowboys on Sundays because that's who was playing nationally. And
Back when there was three channels.
you're right. And we had remotes. It was just us. Hey, go
Yeah,
change the channel.
exactly. The mobile remote.
Yeah,
Son, go turn
exactly.
the channel.
And then if the service wasn't coming in, we'd have to hold the antennas, the rabbit ears. Move it
Exactly.
this way.
Well, I think every kid in the country was either, for the most part, at least I grew up in Michigan. Detroit wasn't very good, and so you had to pick somebody to root for. And for me, it was the Steelers, right? So it was the Cowboys and Steelers, and I had buddies
Yep.
that their team was the Cowboys, and so that whole '70s was magical. Just that was a great time in the NFL, and some unbelievable games and teams back then.
Yeah, it was. And so people always ask me who'd you look up to? Well, it was Roger Staubach, Tony Dorsett, Drew Pearson,
Yep.
Randy White, all those guys. And I knew the Steelers too, because like you said, it was the clash of the Titans, and
Yep.
hated the Steelers. But as I got older, respected the heck out of what they
Yeah.
did. Just very impressive. And, so it started to build. School wasn't great. I didn't love it, and it didn't love me back for a long time. And, struggled through it, but was motivated by wanting to play, and motivated by a heavy hand at home if you didn't meet standards. And it was just a good upbringing, non-assuming, hardworking, everyday people. And started to find out that when I started to play team sports, that I was a decent athlete and could do a lot of things. And my two older brothers, would knock the crap out of me all the time. So it wasn't like I wasn't tough, because when we got in fights, whatever's sticking out got hit. And if it was the head got hit.
You
So
learn to cover up.
no, yeah,
I was a younger brother, 4.5 years younger than my brother, right? And you get towed around with your brother, and you're going to be playing with older kids, and I think ultimately it helps you
oh yeah, definitely.
developmentally. I mean, you just got to learn to survive, and you're playing against tougher competition, and it brings out the best in you. So
Right. And you get used to the competition being better and physically stronger. And so you just have to tough it out. And so when it comes to putting on the pads and everything, well, if there's people older and bigger, you've already seen that. You've already gone through it. So it's not like, a lot of times in coaching, you have the oh shit syndrome, where the ball receiver is wide open and he's like, oh shit. And that's what you get, because what you see and think about is what you eventually get. The Bible talks about whatever you dread or fear comes upon you, right? And so, you got to get rid of that. But, sounds like we were made of the same cloth. You didn't have that because you'd already done it. And so, it just flowed right into competition, and it wasn't a big, oh crap moment.
kind of the old line, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to your level of training, right?
Right.
If you've practiced at that level and you've had that intensity, it's not your first time. Even just visualization,
Mhm.
putting yourself in those positions so your mind doesn't know the difference between subconscious and conscious, and if you can take yourself through those situations. So you mentioned the Bible. I know you're a man of faith from we have a mutual friend, Lester Archambault, who played with you
Oh, yeah.
in Green Bay, and I know you were good friends with Lester, but he was a believer, and I actually accepted Christ my rookie year in Atlanta, right? So that
Mhm.
that was kind of a cool time in my life, having
Yeah.
grown up.
And
Not Go ahead.
a note to that: when he came to the Packers, we got drafted in the same year. I was sixth round, he was seventh round, and we were like best friends. We did everything together, and there was nights we go play, charity basketball games, and we'd have these talks all the way back home because he was really questioning God, and his faith was trying to make it his own. And he has told me since that basically he's a Christian because of the talks we had. And
That's cool.
it's just like, well, wow, I would never have guessed that at the time that was on the line. Because people think that going out there and screaming, holler, and beat people over the head with the Bible is the way to do it. It's not. You put your arm around somebody and live life out, and then you get the opportunity to speak into their life because of the way you handle situations.
Yep.
And
Well, and we're
that's how you
we're
change them.
we don't have to take on the onus of saving people, right? The Holy Spirit will do that, and all we need
Right.
to do be as a conduit for Him. So so you go to high, you get beat up growing up, you develop your skills, you move on to high school. I'm sure you're a pretty successful high school player. Uh, so take us through that? Okay, how do you end up getting to Northern Iowa? I suspect maybe you had dreams of going to the big schools in Iowa and whatnot, but what ended up getting you to Northern Iowa?
Yeah, so basically, my wife was instrumental in it. But you always dream of wanting to play in the NFL, and for me, it was Iowa State was 45 minutes away from where I grew up, but Iowa Hawkeyes were good back then, and so they were on TV a lot. And when I would go out and like Saturday mornings, I would go haul corn and beans, and you only had the AM radio, and so you listened to the Iowa game. And
Yeah.
if the Iowa game wasn't on, you listened to Iowa State. And so you would do that, kind of recovering from the game the night before. And so that's anybody in the state, that's who they want to play for. But and I never paid attention to Northern Iowa because up until '82 they were Division II, and then they went to FCS. And I heard Drake and knew that they were good back then. And so, but Drake was, whatever. School wasn't great for me, so who knows what was going to happen. But I just dreamed of playing as a Hawkeye, and as it turned out, I graduated with 19 kids in my class, 9 boys, 10 girls, and so when you're from that small of a town, you have to play most every sport, otherwise you don't have enough. And
Yeah.
the big schools come in and they look, well, oh, how many kids you got, what's the competition you play, so they don't even really give you a look. And so that's basically what happened. I had a head coach my senior year that played Division III college football, Wayne State, Nebraska, and he kept pushing me to talk to Iowa and Iowa State. Well, I've got letters that say thanks but no thanks. And then and I didn't really even know this. Tells you how naive I was. My grandmother graduated from Northern Iowa in 1929. It was called Iowa State Teachers College.
All right.
But I was clueless to that. She was a teacher, and she was so much older. I think when I was a sophomore in high school, she passed away right before the start of the season, and she was like 82, 84, something like that. So I didn't know her that well, and never really got to understand that. But then after I went, said I was going to go to Northern Iowa, then my dad and my mom told me about that. So there was some history there. It's just I didn't know it. And so right before the start of my junior year, or the right after my junior year, I stayed overnight with my cousin, and he was going to go to this youth lock-in at a neighboring church. And so I had to go because I was staying overnight. And
This
unbeknownst
is
to me,
in, this is in college or high
and
school?
this was in high school.
High school. All
And
right.
unbeknownst to me, my future wife was going to be at that lock-in. And so that's kind of where that started. So we started dating the summer before my senior year. She had just graduated high school, and she doesn't remember this because I made such a great impression. My freshman year in high school, I met her one time, but she has no recollection. So it's probably a good thing, because I always say that
Goofy freshman.
yeah. Well, I always say that if we would have went to the same high school, she probably would never have dated me. So because I don't know, just awkward, weird times and all that. But anyway, we started dating. She went to Northern Iowa, and then once Iowa and Iowa State said thanks but no thanks, my head coach was like, "You ought to check out Northern Iowa." And so I was like, okay. And I'd been up for a game. They didn't have me up. I just went to see my girlfriend, and went to a game, and the dome was really cool. And so, I don't know, near the end of the season, my wife and her girlfriends were going out to a pizza joint on the hill. It's kind of like Dinkytown for Minnesota. There's just a little business section on campus. And so it was a pizza place, and they were there, and the coaches walked in, and one of her friends was a cheerleader, and she knew the coaches, and she had met me and knew that my struggles in recruiting. So she walked up to the coaches and said, "Hey, you should check out her boyfriend. He's big and he's good and he wants to play football." So they took down my information, and got a hold of me, and eventually came and watched me play basketball. And then they offered me a scholarship, and really, I don't know how they ever figured out that I was any good, because the video that I've seen of me in high school, it's hard to tell who I am.
It's the old 8 millimeter, or what, 16 millimeter, off the
not
dual
not quite
reels.
that
And then,
not quite that bad, but it's close. In college, I had that. That's what we used in college,
yeah.
and the film would break, and I'd have to
Oh
tape
yeah.
it together. And
Good old days.
yeah, and but anyway, so they came and watched me play basketball, and saw my size and my athleticism, and late in the process they offered me, and I don't know, they bid against themselves, because at FCS level you can break it down half, whatever. But to me it was a God thing, because of the struggle I had in school. Because God knew if I didn't get a scholarship, I wouldn't go to college, because it was that much of a struggle for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's funny how things work out. You look back on it now from this view and you're like, wow, it's pretty amazing the things that have happened to me over the years. I'm not that lucky of a person. It has to be more than that. And for me, it's God. I know it is. So, that's basically how it happened. And, just so my wife takes credit for my career.
You mentioned growing up, dad reading scripture and whatnot. Is there a point in your life where you remember, becoming, making that personal decision to accept
I,
Christ, or is it
I
something?
do. There was a evangelist that would go around kind of the upper Midwest. I think they were from Minneapolis, Lowell Lumstrom. And it was at Fort Dodge High School. And I was 4. And he gave the altar call. And I still remember seeing it, the auditorium and the seats, and walking down. I just knew that I needed to do that. And, it wasn't that I was completely converted and I was righteous after that. It wasn't that I had no sin, but I put my faith in God, and,
Mhm.
just kind of blossomed from there.
You're not perfect, just redeemed,
Right.
right?
And
So
thank God.
that's cool. That's funny because, yeah, I mean, I didn't accept Christ until I was, almost 24 years old. So a little bit different. And I remember it's kind of funny. I remember a youth pastor at the church I attended in Atlanta, him asking me to speak to the youth group, and he kind of had a story similar to yours. He goes, I'd really like you to come share with the kids, because I just feel like my story doesn't really doesn't really you know translate to them, because he goes, what do I tell them? I lived a life of debauchery and then I committed my life to Christ at age 4. Your story probably will resonate a little more with them. So, uh,
well, I can't say that I was perfect by any means.
none of us
A lot of
are.
times you look at my life and you'd be like, he claims to be a Christian. But we all have to work out. The Bible talks about working out your salvation,
Yep. Yep.
and boy, I had to.
Well, I've heard the line, and I think it's a good one to live by. As if you were accused of being a Christian, could your neighbor's testimony convict you in the court of law? Right. You
Mhm.
can say all you want, but will your neighbors bear witness that you are what you say you are, right?
Mhm.
And I think that
and
that
and and even probably more on top of that is your coworkers.
yeah, yeah, those that see you on a day to day basis for sure. So, all right, so you go to Northern Iowa. Obviously, you have some success there. You end up being a sixth round pick of the Green Bay Packers. So not a I was a sixth rounder as well. I'd like to think you're probably one of the more high profile sixth rounders. I know Tom Brady gets a lot of credit for a sixth rounder, and Terrell Davis was sixth round, but Bryce Paup. I mean, we'll get to this, but I mean, you went on to be NFL Defensive Player of the Year. But nobody was projecting that as you were coming out of Northern Iowa, kind of like when you came out of high school, right? So you kind of had to prove some people wrong. And so you end up with the Packers. How did that come to be?
Yeah, well, a little bit of. Can we go back a little bit?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
just to give a little bit more to the story, is my senior year, 9 through 12, we had 19 guys start training camp. The first day of camp, one kid decided football wasn't for him. By the first 2 weeks were done, 2 kids moved away and one kid broke his ankle. So we had 15 kids.
Wow.
And so we played 11-man football, and we actually played the whole year. And we would take a mini bus to the away games, and the cheerleaders were in the front. So, just to give you some perspective on the
Yeah.
whole deal, I didn't make all state. I made, I don't know, the smallest class in the state of Iowa was class A or something like that. And I made maybe special mention, wasn't even honorable mention. all
Okay.
state. And
Yeah.
so, just to give you a little bit of perspective on that, and I converted a chicken coop into a weight room because our school didn't have a weight room.
Yeah.
They had a universal machine in the lunchroom. And my sophomore year, I got on it and I could bench the stack. Well, that's not true benching, because it's
Right.
not free weights. And so the spring of my senior year, in high school, after I got done playing basketball, I had to actually build a weight bench. I welded a weight bench together in shop class and started lifting. And the first time I got under 135, it was like this.
Got the
Um,
shakes going.
yeah, exactly. Because it's a lot
A different
different. The
different deal.
proprioception and the motor learning takes a while to figure that out. And so by the time I went to training camp, I was benching 315. But I had to, because there was no place there, and the hours we worked during the summer wasn't conducive to stopping when people could do lifting
Hmm.
at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. Well, that doesn't work. You work all day long, and then at 8, 9 o'clock at night, you got time, you go in the chicken house and you start lifting. And
I
so
love it.
that's
But
just
you had
process.
to find a way, right? I mean, that's part of it.
Yeah.
If you want something bad enough, you got to find a way to make it happen, and you certainly did in the chicken coop. So a lot of guys
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
say that. You're probably pretty unique in that.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't even know the story. And so, when I talk to them, I ask them, what size of a school do you think I came from? Because, well, you had to come from a big school. No.
Not
You know,
so much.
you try to take away all the crutches so that they can see, hey, you know what? If you want it bad enough and you're dedicated, it's kind of like Mike Tomlin says, it's not what you're capable of doing, because as you know, there's more talent walking the streets than is in the NFL.
Oh
Why
yeah.
is that? Because for whatever reason, Carol Dweck wrote a book, Mindsets. I don't know if you've heard of that, and
No, but I'll
it's
check it out.
it's growth mindset versus fixed. And the ones that wash out that you've seen, that I've seen, because there'd be guys that come into training camp, you're like, holy crap, if this guy has it all together, I'm gone. Right. But inevitably they would wash out because they were talented as all get out, but they couldn't put it together.
Yeah.
They didn't have the work ethic. They wouldn't listen. They wouldn't do what they needed to do. They'd be undisciplined outside of football. They wouldn't take care of themselves, whatever. They didn't have the ability to bust their butt every single snap because no one disciplined them. And they weren't willing to put in the time to study the film, because as you know, if you're going to stay and get good at anything, it's the details, it's the
Hmm.
little things. It's kind of like a sprinter. When you first start running, you take off 5-10 seconds, but then when you get to Olympics, hundreds, thousands of a second. It's the little things. Well, that's what.
Painstaking attention to detail.
Exactly. And it
Yeah.
has to be consistent. So those are the things that, as you go, you have to pay attention to. And it's just like that in any business.
So, you go from small town high school football. You're at Northern Iowa. What was your progression there? How quickly did you, reach starting position and get yourself on the
But
field?
yeah, well, I don't know. I guess I was so naive and young and dumb that I didn't know that I should be intimidated. And so,
Part
I
of
went.
being a younger brother.
Yeah, exactly. So when I got to Northern Iowa, I didn't know that I shouldn't be beating, starters, because they put me at defensive end. I'd run around them and they'd get all pissed off, and you know how it goes.
Yeah, yeah,
When you're supposed to be a scout team guy,
yeah.
and you're beating the starters, they get a little pissed off and they try to come after you. And so, I just did what I was supposed to do, go 100 mile an hour. And I was so naive. I thought, well, if I can do this, anybody can do it, you know, because I didn't understand, the blessing that God had given me. When people talk to me about the game of football, I said, you know what, I hit the gene lottery pool because I was built for this game. Had one surgery in 21 years of football. And that was preventable. It's just I was so naive. I didn't know the right way to lift. And I lifted, you see the front of your body, so you work the front of your body. Well, it pulls your shoulders down and in,
Yep.
and then you have an AC joint problem. Well, if I would have had the right coaching in that or right information, that wouldn't have happened.
Right.
So I can't take complete credit for this because God gave me the ability. I'm just very thankful that I was born in a country at a time that they paid a lot of money to violent people that knocked the crap out of people, and you didn't get in trouble.
Well, yeah, you know what? That's true. That's true. But to your point, yeah, there's plenty of people walking around, and I could look back in my career, and plenty of teammates that I played with that had way more physical talent. In fact, as you were saying that, I remember being on recruiting visits, right? And I was recruited by some bigger schools. And I remember going to like games on a Saturday and I'd see some of these other recruits. I'm like, oh my gosh, man, this guy is like out of this world. I'm nowhere near as big and strong as this dude. And look, he's got a man's body with the big old guns. And here I am, this, little fella and relatively speaking, but yeah, but it doesn't always work out like that, man. Play like Tarzan or look like Tarzan, play like Jane in some cases, or just to your point, you don't have the mental fortitude to work through some of the tough times that you run into inevitably, whether it's, dealing with being behind somebody for the first time in your life or overcoming injuries or, just the whole thing especially when you get to college and you're an 18-year-old kid and you're playing against 22 or 23-year-olds, right? Big difference between the man's strength and the boy's strength at times.
Oh, definitely. And when I first started, there was some not nutrition that was going on, but there was other substances that were going.
Yeah, well, same for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that makes it even harder to a certain degree. But to your point with the 6th round draft pick, when I got to training camp, I mean, I had 95. Well, there was a tight end that had 95, so that tells you.
Wait a minute.
Yeah,
How's
yeah,
that
right.
happening?
Yeah, right. And so that kind of tells you what the expectation was.
Yeah.
You know, flip a coin, which one's going to make it, or either one going to make it. We don't know. And so going to the Packers, I had, kind of a step up or a leg up on people because my defensive coordinator, my senior year, ran the same exact defense terminology word for word as the Packers because he had coached with the defensive coordinator at the Packers at one time. And so when I got to mini camp, the defensive coordinator, who was a linebacker coach, my coach, because I was a middle linebacker to start out with, would ask questions and I would answer them. And the veterans would turn around and look at this snot-nosed rookie answering the question like, who in the heck is
That is a huge
this?
advantage because I mean, as a rookie in the NFL and you're learning a new system and you're playing all these guys that have been playing for years, that's such a disadvantage. But yeah, that's a huge advantage as you go in
Uh,
there if you know the language already.
oh, yeah.
That's
And,
awesome.
that year, I think we had enough guys at that time. I think I was like fourth string to start out with, and I had never been on a team where people get cut. And so I'll never forget the one of the first people that got cut. I was starting to become friends with them, and all of a sudden, I come to the locker room and their locker is empty. I'm like, what? What happened?
Oh,
You just got cut. Really? That lights a fire too.
yeah.
Oh crap!
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
real
That
now.
it sure is. That's yeah. All of a sudden, either he got cut or the rapture happened or something. Where I don't know. He's gone.
It's funny you should say that because growing up, there was times when I would swear the rapture happened because my mom and dad would be gone. My dad wouldn't come home till real late, and a lot of times my mom was out doing whatever because I was the youngest, and I'm sure get tired and they're off doing their own thing and I'd be at home, it's first watching Gilligan's Island and Hogan's Heroes and all that stuff, and then it would get to be 8, 9 o'clock at night and I'm thinking, oh my god, the rapture happened and I'm left and
I'm
all
left
this.
behind. Oh no.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like Home Alone. Could have
Mm-hmm.
been a movie.
Exactly. But sorry, you got
No,
sidetracked.
that's cool.
But
Well, all right. So you're four string. You didn't. Looking at your stats, you didn't play that much as a rookie.
Right.
Obviously, you probably were stacked behind some people. So when did the light go on and you said, you know what, I can play this game? And you were playing with some pretty good players in Green Bay. One man that a lot of people know, Reggie White, obviously was an
Hmm.
unbelievable force of nature in the
Yeah,
NFL and a
he
man of
was.
faith, which and you also played, and I just connected the dots. Wasn't really thinking about it, but a teammate of mine at Michigan State, Tony Mandarich, who I had on the Lions share last year. And it's interesting talking to Tony because you mentioned, the pharmaceutical side of the game, so to speak, and he speaks openly about that, about his history and stuff now, and is a man of faith as well. And so it's interesting to look back as 30 some years later, how guys grow up and move on and
Mhm.
overcome their demons and stuff. But speak to, if you would, a little bit the impact Reggie had on you in terms of his football prowess, but more than that, maybe even his faith life.
Yeah, well, to speak to the football prowess, when he would talk or do something, it was like, oh wow, you listened because he was a proven commodity, and when he first came, I was kind of stayed off and just watched him, but he had such a great personality. He was infectious. I mean, he would get in and mix it up with anybody, verbally, and it was kind of fun to see that. And he was a Christian, and was open about his faith. I'll never forget. There was one time we were in New York, and we were going to play the, I don't know, Jets, I think, and the guys on the bus were just ripping him about somebody. I can't remember who it was in the news that came to faith, and um, they were saying, because he had done some horrific things, and he claimed to be a Christian. Is he going to heaven? And Reggie, was kind of and I was like, well, it doesn't matter. His sins are forgiven. Yeah, his sins are forgiven. Then he'd go back at it, But he was a great teammate. Whether it was if you needed something, he was there for you. Yeah, on the field, he was a freak of nature. Tore a hamstring one time and played in spite of it. Um, and I teach the hip toss or the hump move. And, I'll never forget, I was watching him when he first came because it was like in 92. And I was there when he got there. And, I was watching him and I wanted to figure out because I would watch people and I would try to steal a move from them
Sure.
and to perfect my game, to expand my game. And I was watching him how he did it. And so one time I asked him, "Hey Reggie, how do you do the hip toss or the hump move?" "Well, you come up here and you do this." Okay, got it. And that was like, okay. So people, freak of natures can do things, but a lot of times they can't articulate or they don't know how they do it.
I
You
just
know,
do it. I'm super strong and I throw dudes around that are
right?
300
Exactly.
pounds. I don't know. It just
Pick
happens.
things up and I put them down. It's kind of like that mentality because they can just,
I played with a guy. I played with a guy in Atlanta, Jumpy Gathers, if you
oh
remember
yeah,
Jumpy. I mean,
human forklift.
the forklift. He just would boom, plow guys back into the quarterback. He was a scary dude as a rookie. I think it was
Oh,
his first year in Atlanta. My rookie, and you did not want. I avoided the lunchroom at all costs. Robbie Tobeck, who played like 14 years in the league, I was an offensive lineman. He was a free agent rookie. The year I got drafted, and we would avoid the cafeteria when Jumpy was in there because he would torment rookies, and he was just a scary looking dude, right? And he wasn't all that pleasant. You're saying Reggie was pleasant. Jumpy wasn't all that pleasant, man. So we avoided him at all costs. But watching that dude just pick grown men up and just forklift them back into the pocket, it was something to behold. So,
Yeah,
but some guys they have that unbelievable physical ability. But I mean, Reggie he was one of a kind for sure. So
he
and,
was.
and I imagine it was probably kind of nice playing on the line with him because he took a little bit of the attention.
Yeah, well, yeah. At first, not so much because in nickel situations, I was a middle linebacker, but in nickel situations, I put my hand on the ground and rush the passer, and I was a defensive end. Well, when he first got there, he wasn't going down inside. So who
Yeah,
had to go down inside?
I gotcha.
I did. And so I learned in a hurry, because I was going against Nate Newton and guys like that that were a lot bigger than I was. Because at the time I was like 235, 240 maybe.
Yeah,
And so I had to use my quickness. I had to back off the ball because when you go from defensive end to defensive tackle, things happen quicker. And if
right.
you
There's
stay
not
snugged
much
up on the
space.
ball, you're going to get jammed up too fast. And so I
Mhm.
would back off the ball to give me that timing.
Yeah,
And so I learned that because of that. But having him there, I could pierce the guard tackle gap, the B gap, and then he would come down and cave it in. And a lot of times, he would chase the quarterback out to me when that pocket caved. And so it was really nice having him there. And in regular downs, to have him inside plugging up the run was good too.
yeah. And obviously, you had some success in Green Bay, and
Mm-hmm.
as your time went on there, and you had a nice season in '94, and Reggie was sacking a lot of people, 93, 94 there as well. So then you get the opportunity to get into free agency, and you really get a chance to yeah, and I think my rookie year '93 was the first year of free agency, right? Or well, with the collective bargaining agreement and then the salary cap and the whole bit. But you get an opportunity to go to Buffalo. So, and I guess what as you I guess was there an offer on the table from the Packers, or what happened there, and what took you ultimately to Buffalo? Obviously, it was a nice contract, which I'm sure was nice at the time. But what were some of the dynamics there to take you to Buffalo and
Well,
leave Green Bay?
Holmgren and Wolf had come in after the '91 season. So in '92, they came in and they wanted to completely retool the whole team because they wanted their own guys in there, which they have the right to do that if you're getting paid to, put your name on the line and build a program, bring in your own guys. Well, they got rid of, I think, everybody but two guys from that team. And I was there before them. And so they didn't see probably enough value. And it kind of goes back to the year before. I think sometimes it kind of blurs. Um, a couple of years before, they had, like in '92, I held out a training camp. They brought me in. They cut a guy that played there, started there for 3 years before. And, talking about faith, the spirit of fear jumped all over me. It's like, oh my gosh, if they cut that guy, what are they going to do to me? And so they put me at that position, which I hadn't played before, as outside linebacker. And so I floundered big time. So after about 6 games, something like that, they yanked me out of the starting lineup. Well, what usually happens in that kind of a scenario is the guy starts pissing and moaning, feeling bad for themselves, and then you get cut, start bouncing around, and you're not there very long. Well, I'll never forget this. I'm driving home because I just found out, and Holmgren, it was right before we were getting on the plane to go to Detroit, and he looked, pulls the team up after that little practice, and he looked straight at me and talked straight at me the whole time. He said, "Some of these young guys here with a lot of potential better start putting out, otherwise you're not going to be here very long." Oh my gosh. Yeah. And so I'm driving home, and we had a little bit of time between the practice and getting on the plane. And my place was halfway between the airport and the stadium. So my family was there. We were having a 1 year birthday party for my son. And and I'll never forget driving down Cormier Road in Green Bay, pulled over to the side of the road and just lost it. Like, oh my gosh, I made a mess of my career. God, if you want me to stay in this, then you got to take this. And luckily for me, that game we were playing Detroit, and we played nickel the whole game because of Barry. And so I started at left defensive end. Well, the first play of the game, I took the offensive tackle and sacked the quarterback with the offensive tackle. And I had a sack and a half and had a bunch of tackles and stuff like that. And from that point on in the season, I had 6.5 sacks and a bunch of tackles and stuff. But what I did was I went to my position coach and I was like, hey, you know that I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I need help. And so what he did, instead of, just poo-pooing me and giving me the cold shoulder, he basically said, okay, we're going to build you, but we're going to start with habits. Okay. So you're just going to work on one thing. And so it was because I was a middle linebacker. That's what I was used to. And so I wanted to try to make every play. Well, when your eyes are in the backfield and the tight end, as you know, when I look in the backfield, you know where the play is going. So you position yourself. Well, I stop my feet and look in the backfield trying to make a play. I'll never make a play. And I'll always get hooked. So he said, the first thing you do, you get lined up, you look at the tight end, and if he steps out, you step out with your outside foot and put your inside arm in the middle of his chest. You just work on that. And so we did one step at a time and then they drafted a kid in the first round to take that position. Well, he came in and and got hurt, and he was supposed to be a starter. Well, 2 weeks before training, or yeah, before the regular season, he got hurt. This was my last year in Green Bay, and I had just had surgery on my shoulder. So they had put me at middle linebacker, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just had surgery on my shoulder, and I'm playing middle linebacker. God, you got to help. And so my pastor actually showed up like a week before training camp, and he talks to me because he knew I was nervous about it, and so he leaves, and he came back and knocked on the door, and I'm like, what's going on? He goes, I don't usually do this, but God told me no weapon formed against you is going to prosper. Gave me that scripture. Well, he didn't know. He didn't know my mom. My mom had just given me that scripture like 2 days before that. And so that kind of made the hair on my neck stand up. It's like, okay, God, you got this. Well, 2 weeks before the start of the season, that kid, those first round draft choice, gets hurt. They put me back outside. Well, I didn't give up that position. He had to sit on the bench the whole year. I went to the Pro Bowl at that position, where a year and a half later, I got yanked out of the starting lineup. And it just shows you, when start from ground zero and build habits and pay attention to detail, anything is possible.
Well, that's awesome, man, because it's so true in life in general, right? You get knocked down, and it's really easy to woe is me, and you start feeling sorry for yourself, and rather than just saying, hey, let's take a look in the mirror and what do I got to do to get where I want to be, right?
Right.
And sometimes it's one building block at a time, getting a hand on the guy's chest, and all right, we'll go from there. Start doing that right, and let's baby step. I always relate it to what about Bob, Bill Murray? I'm doing the work. I'm baby stepping. So that sometimes that's all you got to do, man. I mean, one step
Right.
at a time. Don't worry about finishing the 100 meters. Let's get the first step down and
Yep.
take it from there. So it's a great message. And so obviously, I mean, you go from being benched to all pro or the Pro Bowl. And then you get the opportunity to hit free agency. And tell us a little bit about how
Yeah.
you ended up in Buffalo.
Yeah. Sorry, I got kind of in the weeds with
Oh
that.
no, that's great. I love it.
I'll start this off with one quick story, because when you get to the top, you can't forget what got you there. And so
Yeah.
I make the first Pro Bowl, and I go out to practice, and I'm out there thinking I'm all this, you know, and I had a terrible practice. And that position coach that built me from not knowing what I was doing to Pro Bowl, he pulls us up after practice, and he rips my ass up one side and down the other. And I'm like, what? He goes, basically, you're not that kind of a player. You can't come out here and half ass it. You got to pay attention. You got to do the little things. You got to bust your ass. Otherwise, you're nothing. Hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. So, just because you have some success doesn't mean you've arrived, and I learned that lesson, and I was able to help, because I've had other guys that I coach, and I always tell them that story before I rip after I've ripped their butt.
Yeah.
just because, hey, you know what? You can't forget what got you there. I wasn't I wasn't this guy that was this great talent. I had to work at it. And if I didn't, I wasn't going to be any good. And
Well, yeah, to your point, you hear people say, "Oh, I play." We all play to them. Ah, man, I'm a game player, right? No, 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 no.
yeah,
You don't practice at one level and expect you're going to play at the highest level. It doesn't work that way. And much to our point about the mindset and uh, having trained at that level, don't rise to the occasion. You sink to your level of training, and that's
yeah.
so true.
Yeah, but I'll
Um,
get back to your free agency question. You've asked this twice, and I've kind of
no, that's good.
chased the
That's why
rabbit
we're here.
trail twice.
I love your
But
story. So keep
but
sharing.
anyway, so after the season, I made the Pro Bowl, and they just weren't willing to pay because they had this kid that they had in the first round, and they needed to. It's like with anything. If I'm being held accountable for what I'm doing at my job, I better show that what I'm doing is producing. So they got rid of me and kept that kid, and so Green Bay, the year before in '93, I actually had 11 sacks. And during that season, Holmgren, because one of the coaches that was in the meetings would hear Holmgren say, "Hey, can we give that sack to somebody else?"
Wow.
Because I was getting too many, and I was actually had a Reggie. And finally, what they did is they quit rushing me. I had to play in the nickel defense. I had to play stand up inside backer. What but whatever.
Yeah.
And so they had to kind of manipulate things. So when free agency came around, they basically said we got the contract from Buffalo, and they basically said we can't even come close to those numbers. So they don't give you an opportunity to say yes or no to something. We can't match that. See ya.
Yeah.
And so, I've heard that Ron Wolf said one of the biggest mistakes ever made was letting Bryce Paup go. So, that's kind of a feather in your hat. But when you're, loyal and dedicated to a team, I hadn't been ever traded to a team. You go to a team, you play for them, and you're loyal, and the people reciprocate. Well, I mean, I'll never forget when I'm leaving town because we actually drove from Green Bay to Buffalo. Um, I was crying for about the first half hour driving out of Green Bay because that's all I knew.
Yep.
And what was this new program? How was I going to be accepted? There was all kinds of expectations, and this 3-4 defense. How was I going to be? I didn't even know, if it was going to work out. There was a lot of pressure, and it just so happened to work out that I was a jack of all trades in Green Bay, but a master of none because I kept getting moved around all these different places. And when I got to just sit in one position and study
Mhm.
it and become a master at it, it took off.
There's riches and niches, and I think
Yeah,
Buffalo saw that in you, and
yeah,
I'm sure Wolf probably, if ever he felt bad about letting Bryce Pop go, it was probably in the 1995 season, right? Because you went on and you had a little bit of success, NFL's Defensive Player of the Year, which is incredible. I mean, and to think about where you came from, right? This little small high school, 19 kids on a team starting the season and down to whatever 15, and you ascend all the way to that level. I mean, it's a fantastic story. Obviously, you had a long career, 11 seasons, I think, right?
yes,
And it's incredible story. And the cool thing about it is, and I've enjoyed, hearing you share that. But you get done playing. You've had a long coaching career as well, which you've been able to pour back into the game and teach kids all the knowledge you have, which is great. But now you're kind of transitioning a little bit and taking your message on the road, so to speak. And I'd like to let you share a little bit. I think you've got a great story to tell, and now you're looking to share that with companies and groups and associations and whatnot. Speak to that a little bit and tell us what Bryce pops up to these days.
yeah. It's kind of funny that I should be transitioning into this because I'll never forget the first time in high school that I had to do a speech. Oh my gosh, it was terrible, terrible at best. But there was actually I knew the topic, I was just really nervous, didn't know how to start it, didn't know how to wrap it up. But in the middle of it, I knew the subject and I was fine because I knew it. And the first time I ever talked to a group when I was in the NFL, it was horrible at best too because I got so nervous. But
Hmm.
there's as you get used to anything, it's just like moving from one position to another. If you study it and practice it and really work at it, it should transition and you should be able to articulate excuse me, what you have to say. And so I I just feel like, now is a good time because I've given back, like you said. I think I've coached what 13 years, something like that. And it's gotten to the point now in college where you wake up and it's Christmas. And you wake up and it's Christmas. And you wake up and it's Christmas. And it's like, holy cow, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. And
The days are long and the years go fast, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But so, this year was kind of rough on me physically. And so, 2 years ago, last year at Northern Iowa, we were three and whatever. You lose your job. Understandable. I go to Iowa State, we're 8-4, and then the head coach goes somewhere else, and not necessarily does he take everybody or that you really want to go, because my family is all in the state of Iowa.
Yeah,
you
you're
know uh,
entrenched, and Matt
yeah,
Campbell goes to Penn State, taking that job. So
yeah, and so it's really tough, and it just, I don't know, just was not maybe a great fit for that to happen, because the grandkids are here, and you want to get to know them and spend time with them, and enjoy life a little bit. And so that's what I'm working on doing now, trying to still give back, because to whom much is given, much will be required. And the one thing that I've come across, because I still, I don't know, I'm curious or still want to learn. And
mhm.
and so one of the things, I watch or listen to a lot of podcasts, and there's one thing that I found, Ed Milet. You ever heard of him? Probably have, haven't you?
Yeah, Ed Milet, yeah, love his stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I listen to his podcast a lot. Don't know what has happened to him as of late, but maybe I just haven't looked for him. But anyway, one of the things he said really, stuck with me. It's like he's like, on Judgment Day, God's going to flip on a film of my life, what He had planned for me, and then He's going to flip on the film of what I did, and I want that to match.
Hmm.
And that's kind of, I was like, yes, that is what I can hang my hat on. And it doesn't matter really, that because God put us here, each one of us, for a purpose, right? He has a purpose for each one of us. And a lot of times the devil wants to mess us up, not trying to get too, spiritual, but if he can get his hooks in you as a little kid, he knows, because he can see in the spiritual what we can't see. And he knows what you're supposed to do. And he's going to try to stop that with any way possible. And so, to me, that's why you see all this crap happening to little kids, because, as the Bible talks about, his time is getting short, and he knows that he's got to mess
Hmm.
people up so that they can't fulfill their purpose and people can't be affected. Well, for me, I want to hear, well done, that good and faithful servant, on Judgment Day, and get the crown that
Amen.
I'm supposed to. And so that's what kind of drives me, because as I'm sure with you, you probably could never work again, you'd be fine. And that's a blessing and a curse all at the same time, because that kind of stops you from venturing out to a certain degree, because I don't need to, but you
Right. Yeah,
you
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 get
have,
that comfort zone, but we're called to, right? Especially when it
right.
comes to spreading the message and sharing the gospel.
Right. And so, um, you know, the reason I coached is because I wish I would have had somebody like me holding me accountable and really telling me what life was all about. Because talk about stupid, that was me for a long time. I was a Christian in name a lot of times only, and I have a lot of stupid things in my past. Well, as you grow up, what I want is I want my kids to be better, because what does God require? He requires godly offspring, right? And so for me, it's about helping people become better so that they can have better for their kids. And the same for my family. And so that's what is kind of driving me to help, and talk to someone else, is because if they can figure out, hey, you know what? Because I felt like, do you know the story of Gideon?
Mm-hmm.
He was the least of the least.
Right.
Well, if I told you all the dynamics of my family, that was me. I felt like Gideon.
Yeah.
But the one thing that God gave me was, I had within me, I knew I was going to make it out. That's what drove me. I knew I was going to make it out. Why? How? I don't know. I can't tell you that. I just knew, and that drove me. And so, it's just like now. Who am I going to affect? Who am I going to tell? I don't know. But I want them to listen to my story and give them the hope. Hey, if he can do it, maybe I can do it.
Absolutely. I love it, brother. And how do folks get a hold of you? I work in, you've got a website. Where can they reach out and get a hold of you for
Yeah.
speaking opportunities?
Well, on X, it's just Bryce Paup, at Bryce Paup. And then we have a website. It's so new that, shoot, I'm going to have
That's right.
to.
I'll put it in the comments below if you can shoot it to me, and then we'll get it
Yeah, I
in the
will.
comments
Yeah.
on the YouTube.
Yeah.
But hey,
Because,
listen, man, I appreciate you coming on and spending this much time and sharing your story. And it's been a pleasure. And I think there's a lot of similarities. And maybe it's just because we're getting to be old men, but I see what you're saying is a lot of what I feel. And I'm a couple years behind you, 55, but kind of at that same point, right? Where we've got 6 kids, we got some grandkids now, and you start thinking about, all right, generationally, what impact are we going to leave after we're gone, right? And for my case, I got 5 of my 6 kids working with me, so there's that component, and then the faith life, and little grandkids, that you're impacting for eternity. So I love it, and I think you got a great message, and I wish you well on the speaking tour, and I look forward to seeing you impact people, because I think you will, and you have already throughout your playing days, and clearly with your family. So God bless, and I appreciate you coming on.
all right. Thanks for the opportunity.
You bet. And folks, hey, if you enjoyed the talk with Bryce, hey, hit subscribe. We got a lot of great interviews with other ex NFL players, coaches, and all kinds of financial topics and stuff as well. But family, faith, football, finance, and fun on the Lyons Share. Again, this episode was brought to you by MitchLyonsWealth.com. See you next time.